Welcome to Seymour from the Front Pew podcast, coming to you from the broadcast studio at Seymour First Baptist Church in Seymour, Tennessee, and featuring thoughts and discussions around loving God, loving others, making disciples, and living the life. I am your host, Tiger Brooks, and now, on to the podcast. On to the podcast. It feels like it's been a long time since we've sat around this table together.
Yes.
At least all of us.
I know. We're all four in this room together.
However, we have spent a lot of time together.
That's true.
We have spent entirely too much time together. Having gone to the Tennessee Baptist Convention, the summit of Tennessee Baptists, I guess is the proper way of
I still call it the convention.
Yeah. But here we are, and today we're going to gather around and do our final recap of our final core value that we discussed a couple weeks ago now. It's sent servants. And we have kind of reflected on all of our core values from our mission, love God, love others, make disciples, through all 5 core values. And today we're going to be discussing sent servants. Sent servants is the term that you guys developed. I guess it was some combination thereof that developed. The idea is missions. That's the missions arm of our core values. And it really, I think maybe this could begin the conversation, but essentially it is to drive home the fact that while we are called to be pastors, we've been called to this position for a specific vocational ministry. We know that people are called into service full-time vocational missionaries as well. But sent servants is really to drive home the idea that each and every believer, each and every disciple of Jesus Christ, regardless of what your day job may be, you are to be on mission. And the idea is that we are equipping folks for the work of service, which Scripture speaks to. And so I'll let Pastor Corey kind of jump in. The basis for this passage is Philippians 2, 1 through 18.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, again, I think as we think about our core values, I found this the other day. This is...
We were both just looking
That's
at that.
funny. Okay, all right. So this is a picture of kind of our brainstorming session when we sat down to do our core values. We just sat down with a whiteboard and we were laying out different things that we felt like were important that also kind of caught big major areas inside the life of our church. And of course, hopefully everyone understands that sent servants is also incorporating that missions element inside of our church, but it's the missions element that goes from right here inside the building all the way to wherever God leads us around the world. Mm-hmm. And then with that, it's not just a missions element. Again, we're picking up those words, sent by the church, and I think we covered that pretty well that day, that the church does the sending in all of this. But also that as we are sent, we are servants of Christ. And too many times I think that's the element that we miss. It's the element that separates us out as we go, and that we have to be aware of, that our lives need to have marks of servanthood in them. And as we think about that, that's not off base in the idea that when we accept Christ, we accept Him as Lord and Savior of our life, we are taking on the form of a servant at that point in time. And Paul talks about that over and over, being a bondservant of Christ, which had a lot more cultural relevance as far as when he used that wording and everything than we understand. But and then when we picked up that Philippians 2 passage, it is to be able to help understand those marks, those elements of what a servant looks like. What we I think we talked about some things like humility and unity and avoiding self-centeredness and those types of things. Those need to be evident in our life. And if we're going to see others come to know Christ, if we're going to be sent into our world to share the love of Christ, these elements need to mark our lives so that others can see Christ in us. And so that's kind of that, at least the idea and the concept around what we're going for, what we look at, what we think about with sent servants. And that, again, that fits anywhere in our life. So whether that's our workplace, whether that is out on the soccer field for MVP on a Saturday, whether that is going to Guatemala, that these things need to be a part of our lives, and that we need to see our place in those as being sent into the world to share the love of Christ.
Do you have the passage? Are you going?
Yeah.
Can you bring it up?
When we wrote this on the board, there were two passages that we did, and I was kind of looking up the second one and the first one there. The first one we put was Acts 1:8, which says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." And I think our thought process with that was the sent side, that we're sent out to all the nations. But the interesting one, and I think going on what you were just talking about, the other one that I think speaks to the servant side was Exodus 19. We said 5b and 6a, which basically says, I'm just going to read 5 and 6, says, "Now, if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples. Although the whole earth is mine, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites." And I think that's interesting as we think about the idea that we are not our own. I mean, think about being a servant to someone. We're not our own. We are God's possession. We are His to do with as He pleases. What He pleases is to send us out to the nations, to send us out as His servants for His kingdom, for His glory. And I think that speaks volumes to who we are and what it means to be a sent servant.
Yeah. And I think that it really changes and reframes the way that we think about our lives and how we live our lives. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the exact opposite of what the world wants to tell us, that we are our own person. You know, we can identify as anything we want to be. Yeah. You know, but when you get down to it, we are His. We are created in His image. He has created us to be exactly who we are. Mm-hmm. He's given us our personalities, our intelligence, all of the talents and abilities, traits, everything that we have that makes us who we are, we have as a result of who He is and who He wants us to be. So with that in mind, then the question, it's not a question of, okay, who am I supposed to serve and what am I supposed to be about? It's all plainly given to us in His Word as to what we're supposed to do. The real question is, how are you going to do that, and what's that going to look like when you think about what it is that you bring to the table? Mm-hmm. You know, if you are an electrician, if you're a plumber, if you are a restaurateur, what does that look like in your world, and how do you marshal those resources and those spheres of influence to be a sent servant within that context? And so it really takes the guessing, like, what am I, you don't have to sit around, twiddle your thumbs and like, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I here for? You know, people are seeking purpose in life. Mm-hmm. It's right there for you. People may want to avoid that. I don't like that idea, or I don't, well, that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm. You know, when you really think about that way. Yeah. And so, and that Philippians 2 passage is such a beautiful passage that describes the humility of Christ, who He was, what He did, what He forsake to come and to do what he did for our benefit. And that's the same kind of attitude. Have this attitude which was in Christ. That's what that passage says. And so anyway, I think all of those passages, it's interesting for me kind of coming from the outside, post all of these decisions that were made, to think about you guys sitting around the table and thinking about these passages and pulling an Old Testament passage in there that reminds us of who we are and whose we are. And then thinking about how it is that we can then marshal the resources and human resources that we have to do what God has called us to do. It's an interesting thing.
Well, I think too, you think going to that Philippians passage, that the idea of being someone's servant or possession is humbling.
Yeah.
And that's what Philippians talks about is to have this humility in and of itself. And I think you think about Christ and his, the humility that he had. He recognized even he was God's. I mean, yes, he is God, but he is, he was not here to do his own thing. He was here to do the will of God. And he says that over and over again in his prayers. And, I mean, even in his prayer before, he goes to the cross, not my will, but your will be done. And I think, we are too quick to try and jump on the things that, and again, I think it's because of our society and the way our society has geared us and trained us to think that we're here to do our will, we're here to do what we want. But that, biblically speaking, that's just not the case. We're here to do the will of God's, not ours. And when we give our lives to Christ, it's like we talk about it all the time. Every time I talk to someone that we're walking through this process of salvation, it's Lord and Savior. We want him to be our Savior. Like that's a given. Yes, absolutely. Save me from my sins. Save me from hell. But it's not just saying as my Savior. It's you're my Lord too, which means I am yours. And now do with me as you please.
Yeah, the rescue part we don't have that big of a issue with, and a lot of that is because of where we meet Christ. I mean, like we often meet him in a place where we have understood our desperation and our need.
Yeah,
and that's understandable. But it's the Lord part that we. I mean, like because we often don't really understand what that fully means until better times. I mean, like, because Lord is so much more than the rescue part. It is the whole rest of our life that is a submission. And someone once told me that a great question: who is the authority of your life? And that if we are going to be sent servants, if we're going to be truly Christian, then the authority in our life has to be Christ. It has to be Jesus speaking into everything that we do, meaning wherever we go for decision making, wherever we kind of submit to, they probably understand what's better or what's best in this situation, that we have to be able to go to them. I mean, I think in my life, like if I'm going, dealing with different things, whether that's finances or investment stuff or car things, or if I'm working on my house, right? We have different people in our lives that we're going to call whenever we're dealing with one of those issues, right? I mean, like if I'm dealing with an electrical issue at my house, I'm going to call Scott Flanagan, right? I mean, he's an electrician. He's dealt with those things. He's kind of the authority to help me know, all right, well, I ran into this and this doesn't seem right. What should I do? The reality is that the final authority for us in our life, that authority figure, there needs to be one. Now, again, I'm not saying that we don't use other people as resources to help us through life, but the final authority in our life has got to be Christ. And if we don't get to that point, then I think we really we almost have to go back and rethink through all of the core values, not just the last one.
Yeah.
But that's the element that we pulled out there with that idea of servants or whatever else, is that we've got to submit ourselves. We've got to serve Christ as the authority of our life, as the Lord of our life, and as the director for where and what we are going to be doing. The other element of that is the sent side. Again, we pick back up, and I think about obviously God sends us into where He's got us in our stage in life, our workplaces, our families, and all those other things. But the other element of that is to me, the church commissions and sends over and over. We see that in the book of Acts. Acts 2:42, we see the four elements of the areas: Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. And we've talked about that before, but Jerusalem being our local community context, that for us, that would be Seymour. Judea would be kind of the state of Tennessee. Samaria would be the United States, and then to the ends of the earth. And we see that spread out larger than that. And a reminder that is what we are looking for as a church. We're looking for ministry partnerships, missions partnerships that send us into these different areas, or that as a church we are sending people into these different areas in our world. And so again, we have some of those covered, and we're still working on some of those or whatever else. But God is really opening the door, I think, more and more, where we'll see more of that. And I think over the coming months, maybe years, it may take years, is that we'll see more and more that there is truly a sending element to that. And sometimes that's a sending element for 7 or 10 day trips. Sometimes it may be shorter than that. But somewhere in the future, there may be a sending out of at least a release of, they may not come back. There may be something that we're sending them out to that is significant to go and stay and be and formulate with a new group or whatever else. And so again, I think that was the concept that we were trying to pull together with that idea of sent servants. But yet we are still wrestling through what that all looks like in the life of our church. So, yeah.
It's kind of funny when you think about it, and it's in macrocosm what we deal with in microcosm, and by that I mean, as we discussed our D groups, we have this concept in a D group, and sometimes in our Sunday schools where we grow comfortable with each other, and we want that unit to stay together in perpetuity, and that's really the antithesis of what we are supposed to be doing with those groups. And because the idea is to multiply, to find others that we can bring alongside and disciple and pour into their life for a season so that they can become replicating disciple makers as well. And so we become resistant to do the thing that we're supposed to do. Well, on a larger scale, we as churches, as you say, we are to send people. We are to plant churches. We are to replicate ourselves as churches. We are to send missionaries, and not with the promise that they're going to be back in a week. Sometimes you send missionaries understanding that while you're going to pray for them and support them, you may not see them for a period of time. And so it really is understanding and adjusting our mindset to get on our minds what is on the mind of Christ. And that is a strategy to see that more people come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and become disciples.
Yeah, and I think as we do that, especially if we're sending out missionaries, or if we one day plant our own church, or I say our own, another church, it won't be our own if we go out and plant. But our hope is that a little bit of the DNA of who God has made us goes with them. And so whether that just shapes where and what they do, or whether it is a model that they take up and follow more closely, it doesn't need to be exactly like us, but that what God has shaped and put together here inside the life of our church is something that helps to be something else to be healthy. And I think about that as I think about our Guatemala partnership. They were already an established long-term church. They just had their big, what year celebration? 75th?
Well, it was the the relaunch. It was the 18th year relaunch because they basically closed and then reopened.
But I mean, long before we ever came along, they were an established church. But I think as we have partnered together, it's been neat to see their heart for community and our heart for community and how the DNA lines up. It's not that we've necessarily infused it into them, but maybe we've encouraged it in them and they've encouraged it in us. And we have this lining up that helps us both to be better in our context, in our cultures. And I think that's what we desire in those types of things. I think, again, I think about MVP. MVP fits the heart of our church, and it gets us involved. It gets us connected to people in our community. It lets us try to live out some of our core values to build relationships and to spend time with other people, to encourage them toward worship and all of those types of things. We want those types of things that overlap and that put us in these levels. I sent a text a while ago to these guys because I was like, we haven't mentioned this yet, and I don't know if it's okay to mention it, but I guess it is. So anyway,
I hadn't read it yet.
That we
well, let me get my phone out.
so we
I
have
saw a message from Corey. I'll just ignore that for a while.
we've been working on a new partnership that we are hoping to launch next year, which will be with a replant church in Cincinnati. And the hope is that we can go there and help them. They are seemingly valuing the same things, wanting to reach their community, wanting to do some different things, very similar to how we have done some different things. And we are hoping to be able to, maybe as early as the spring, be carrying teams up there for 4, 5, 7-day trips to be able to help them engage their community and to grow the kingdom in Cincinnati, and that be a missions partnership. And that as we look at that, again, DNA is different, but we see similarities. We see how these things overlap, and we see how what God has laid on our hearts aligns with what God has laid on the hearts of others. And we use that to encourage, to serve them, to serve the church there, and to serve Christ there, and to grow the kingdom of God.
Yeah. I don't think we haven't reached back out to the church to let them know that we.
I just made a note on my phone.
Yeah, we're going to do that. But I want to bring you into this a little bit more, Austin. Austin is our missions pastor.
I have thoughts.
And he has thoughts.
I also have not had enough coffee yet. It's Monday morning.
It is early. But one aspect I want to talk about is what happens when people give in and go on mission. And most of all of us have experience seeing that first-time experience for people, especially, and I think it happens to a greater degree on an international trip when you get people out of the country and well out of their comfort zone. There is something spiritual that happens that really doesn't come into that person's life any other way. No amount of us talking about the possibilities of what this may do in a person's life can fully grasp and capture what actually happens when a person experiences it. Because when anyone goes on a trip for the first time and they're exposed to different things that they've never been exposed to, and they're maybe forced to a certain degree to do things that they wouldn't normally do. Because you have a freedom in that I'm not going to see these people I don't have to see tomorrow or next week. And so I may be free to say things that I would otherwise be hesitant to say. I may act in a way that I would otherwise be hesitant to act because we all go through life not wanting to offend people. Well, what if I tell this person about Jesus and they hate me now? And we create these really crazy scenarios in our mind that really never come to fruition. However, we build these things up because the enemy wants us to be quiet. And so we are released on the mission field, and then all of a sudden they come back and they're like, hey, I can do that here. My week away has changed my other 51 weeks here. Kind of talk about that experience in your own life and the life of people that you've seen, Austin.
Well, and I think I think that challenging anyone who listens to talk to someone, not us, about that, because we can talk about it all we want because we go consistently. I think what you need to do is look at the last team that went to Guatemala or that went to Infuge or whatever it may be. Anytime because we always pray for that group before they go. So you see their faces, you've seen their names, hopefully, on the screens and stuff to be praying for them. When they get back, ask them what it's like. Mm-hmm. And especially those who have been the first time, because I assume it's the same for y'all. The first people who are always asking me about Guatemala are the people who have already been.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because once you've been on mission, and the same thing was with Vermont, the people who have asked me, hey, when are we going back there? It's the people who went. And so once you've given into that and made that initial, because a lot of us have been there for people's first time mission trips. And even just in this last year and a half, we've taken 5 trips now in a year and a half. And I don't know, what percentage of those people was it their first time? Probably 50%.
Yeah, or more.
Or more. And those are the ones that their eyes go and they go, I'm coming back.
Yep.
Yeah, that should tell people something.
It should tell people something. And part of what our goal, what our goal in taking mission trips, it is to spread the gospel. Yes, 100%. It is to reach. It's to fulfill acts and our call to go. But it is also to help people to understand there is not that much difference. Mm-hmm. As you're just saying, what you were doing there, you can be doing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's part of what we need. I say to my groups, and I don't know if they always follow through, but my challenge always to them, and I try and follow up with them, is you are to share the gospel at least once while you're in Guatemala. Right. That's pretty simple. You're going to be forced to do that. When you're back within 1 week, you better do it here. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, you're just letting that apathy take back over. Mm-hmm. So you need to keep up. There's no difference between that Saturday drive home and that Monday morning at work. There's no difference in who you are, in how you're called, in the ability to share the gospel. If anything, you think it's easier in Guatemala, but you have a translator there.
Yeah.
Right.
You got a middleman. Well, here, you don't have a middleman.
It's because we prepare ourselves in our mind to overcome all of those barriers. And then we also, again, the fear element of interacting with that person again and all that other stuff is wrong. But at the core of it, there's more going on, I believe. This is what I did my doctorate on. Yep. And I think that you guys know that. But at the core of it, to me, is how we see people. When we go to Guatemala, we see poverty like we've never seen it before a lot of times. We see living conditions, and we see oftentimes we see hospitality like we've never seen it before, because they have very little, but yet they offer whatever it is to us as we come into their house. And so we see all of that, and whatever it is, it moves us to see that their need is the gospel. And we see that it may not change their house. It may not change their family's dynamics or situations. It may not change that they've been hurt or that people have passed away, or it may not change any of those things. But their need at the core is the gospel. And so we are motivated to share the gospel because we see that as the need that's going to help them where they are. The problem is that we come into our world, and if we take a white bus, just like what we drive around in Guatemala, and we take it and we drive it to the poorer parts of our world where we can go to within 10 minutes, 15 minutes of here, we aren't moved to see their need as the gospel. We are moved to apathy and disdain and anger because we think they ought to be able to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is how we see people and how we see their needs. And too often we have this disconnect when we change cultures. In one culture, we see this as a need to be able to share the gospel, and this is what they need, and this is how we can affect change and help them. But yet over here, we think, well, they ought to just take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. They ought to be able to just fix this themselves if they would just do this or if they would just do that. And yet in the middle of all of that, there's never this idea of they need the gospel.
Yeah. So coming back all the way to the beginning, in how we've talked about this, each week, Tiger, you weren't here for those discussions, so you're interviewing us basically on how we came up with these. And I have thought back, I keep thinking back to sitting in that room at Stephen Street. And And any evangelical church is going to have some sense of value about being sent. They're going to have the Great Commission. They're going to have Acts, something about that, about going forth. And I remember, and even looking at the image of how we laid it out, that for us, it was like a duh.
Yeah.
Duh, there's a sent part. Missions, evangelism, and servanthood were all grouped together.
Yep.
And the thing that we kept talking about is that the sent part that's going to be a component of what we do has to be paired with servanthood. And when we talk then about missions, you go on mission and you are a servant. The hard part is to be a servant here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's what's so hard. And I would say even then, core values, again, if you're evangelical, sent is going to be a part of it from now till Jesus comes back. There are certain things that any church is, I think we even said at the beginning, or your mission statement and everything is going to be similar if you're evangelical church, no matter what. It's just how you nuance it. Our core values are for a season. It is who we are in the context of this day and age. And at some point that will need to change again. But Corey said in that sermon, and we said it again yesterday, that one of the greatest things you can be set apart in this society right now, in this culture that we live in, is to be full of joy and to be a servant.
Yeah.
And if you can capture those two things in your daily life, you can shine the light of Christ probably better than anything else that's just a simple light switch. And so, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think one of the things that's interesting is you think that even thinking about going on these mission trips. When we go on these mission trips, I'm going, and I think anybody who goes on a mission trip goes with the mindset I'm going on missions, and we talk about it from the moment we leave. That means the people you come in contact in the restaurants, the people you come in contact in the hotel, in the airports, and so you look at how everybody acts and reacts on these trips, that even from the gentleman in the hotel, we've met him. He's been there every time we've been there in Guatemala, and we've developed a relationship with him, and we've had multiple times to share the gospel with him. Same with the restaurants. We're going to the same restaurants, and every time we go, we're even stepping into these restaurants, even though those are technically the people that are there to serve us food or to help with the hotels. All of our folks are reacting to them in such a way that I'm on missions. I'm here to serve you.
Yeah, they're fair game.
But that changes when we come home.
Right.
When we come home, it's you're here. We go to a restaurant. You're here to serve me.
Right.
Our mentality changes drastically because of being on missions, and I think the failure there is that we don't recognize that our life is on mission.
Right.
We are always on mission. Just because we go on mission doesn't mean that I'm not still on mission when I come home. And so the way we treat the people in the restaurants, the way we treat the people in the grocery stores should be exactly the same. That we should see, hey, I'm on mission, and every opportunity I have is to share the gospel. That's to the job that I go to. Am I here? I'm here to do a job, but I'm also here to do a bigger job, and that's the job that the one who possesses me sent me to do, which is to share the gospel.
So I'll confess openly, I suffer very much.
Same
So
here. Yep.
We're not getting on to a church member.
No,
because
it's
it's
us.
the same. When I am in, I'm gonna tell you at Rosie's, I know all of their names.
Yeah.
I have a mark on I have a note on my phone with all of their names, their prayer needs. I know which ones are completely lost and which ones are kind of, there is no half saved,
Right.
but that at least have
They have a
spiritual
concept of
interest.
yes,
right.
right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Catholicism. So have some spiritual understanding. I know these things about them, and that's somebody I see
2-3 times a year.
Right.
If that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't do that when I come home.
Yeah.
And I've tried to challenge myself with that. But I think it comes back to Corey, and you need to preach a series on what you just said.
Now he's telling me what to preach.
Yes. Because he can't do it. Because I can't do it. That's right. Puppet master. But you are 100% right, is that we don't see the people down the street the same way we see the people across the world.
Yeah.
And again, it has to begin with me. But man, if we could just do that,
And it's easier said than done. But
Oh, yeah.
It is,
for
yeah.
my context and from my experience is, if we don't talk about that, we never fix it.
Right.
So if we just go away and go do our trip and come back, and we don't ever fix it. But if
So you're going to be talking about it in January, right?
we'll see. But if we'll talk about, if we start with those teams that are already willing to go and say, all right, so
Right.
when we go back, do we see these areas of town the same way?
Yeah.
Do we see our schools the same way? And we are blessed to be partnering with a school with 300 kids ish in it in Guatemala or whatever else. And we know that the vast majority of those kids need to hear the gospel and respond. And when they mob us wanting the little cards that we carry or whatever, we don't get mad. We give them whatever we can, and we play with them as much as we can. But yet, if we walked into our school here, are we going to see those kids? I mean, probably percentage-wise, close to the same. 70-80% of those kids haven't accepted Christ and aren't attending church regularly. I mean, those are real numbers. 70-80% of those kids aren't going to church. They aren't saved because they haven't experienced the gospel. But yet, if they mobbed us trying to get stuff from us, we would be angry and mad, saying they're entitled or they're just trying to get something from us or whatever else. We have got to start seeing our culture differently. We've got to start seeing the people that are around us differently. And we've got to see them as Christ sees them. But I do believe that's one of the motivating factors for why we need to be going on trips and why we need to be doing this thing, is so that we can contextualize it when we come back and see people the same way, and then look for opportunities to share the gospel the same way. Again, the school there opens up for us to come and do Bible study or vacation Bible school or whatever. Basically, anything we ask for, they'll help us to do that. Ours may not do that the same way, but we've got the opportunity to serve them during the summer and help on their playground or fix things. Or we have a vast majority of those kids in our soccer program, and we've got to take advantage of those opportunities to see them in the same ways and present the gospel clearly and effectively.
Yeah.
And not be mad about it. Look for joy. I think Austin also hit on something, a good way to maybe leave some of this as we wrap it up is, do go and talk to people that have gone, that aren't us. I would love to talk to you about it. But you find someone similar to you. No matter where you are in the demographics of our church, you can find somebody similar to you that has gone on this trip. And so I think about my last trip, and I'm gonna forget somebody, and don't get mad at me if I forgot you, but Cindy Ogle and Sheila Davis and Matt Rowland and Scott Flanagan and Caleb Kane and just all kinds, Heather Rowland, all kinds of different people. I think my last trip was about 50-50 on new and veterans, if you will, that have gone to Guatemala before. Impactful though, impactful. For me, I know there was one on our trip that shared the gospel with his real life experience, told his story of how he had overcome some addiction stuff and things in his life, and was in a home with a guy that was battling those same things. And that guy came to know Christ. It was the first time that he'd really used his story to tell the gospel story. And I think in the midst of that realized, man, I can do that same thing with guys that are struggling with the same thing here. So important for us to make those connections and do those things. And so would encourage you. It is not a trip for everybody, and we know that, but it is a trip for a lot of people. There are a lot of different people, most people that can come out and walk around our track at church and do those types of things. They could find a way and a place to be able to serve in Guatemala.
But even more. I mean, yes, only X number of people can go to Guatemala every year with us. We go to Cincinnati.
Yep.
We have MVP devotions. We have Montgomery Village. Like, there are opportunities to get you outside of your normal, to challenge your normal.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the easiest thing to just kind of break down the walls that we're talking about. There was one of the strategies sometimes I will employ when I think about it, is to the next time you're at any restaurant, anytime you sit down anywhere, and the server comes up to your table and they say, let's say her name's Myrtle. Hi, I know. I don't know. Hi, Myrtle. Hi, I'm Myrtle. I'm your server. What can I get you to drink today? And you go around the table and you just say, hey, Myrtle, we're going to be hanging out here for the next hour. Is there anything that in particular we can pray for you when we say our blessing in a minute? You would be shocked and dismayed at how many times, number one, they may break down on you because they've never had anybody ask them, because most people treat them like chattel.
Yep.
And it's just one of those things that you can create a relationship in the moment. And I promise you, the next time you go in there, Myrtle's going to remember, hey, that big bearded dude asked me if he could pray for me, and he prayed for me. And so those are just the little things, and you're not hurting anybody by doing that. All they can say is, no, I'm good. And you go on about your business. Right. Nothing, no worse for wear. But just little things like that, just ways that you can interject this idea of sense servanthood into your everyday life, regardless of whether or not you are at the uttermost parts of the world, or you're in Samaria or Judea or Jerusalem. And so, anyway, I think we've...
Hey, can I close with this? I assume we're landing. Are we landing?
We are.
Okay. So, Jason was talking about identity for a while. It's been a minute, but I thought it'd be cool to close. We introduced a song a couple weeks ago with the kids, and then we did it again. So can I read that to close today?
That's great.
All right, the third verse and fourth verse specifically, but I'm going to read all of it. The one who made the heavens made my heart and soul. Before I drew a breath, I was loved and known. I am his creation, the maker's masterpiece, and all that he designs will be done in me. My body is a temple of the living God. I'll worship in this house that his blood has bought. As I bear his image, oh, may I not profane the holiness I hold in this earthly frame. And if he has redeemed me, I am not my own. The measure of my worth is his love alone. He declares my standing, and he declares my state. So I will know myself by the name he gave. I am not my own, and now my heart is free. O Maker, come and make what you will of me. There's nothing broken that you cannot repair. So, Lord, I leave my life in your loving care. I belong to the Lord, I am not my own. I belong to the Lord, I am not my own. I will honor him, for this I know. I belong to the Lord, I am not my own.
Amen.
Good stuff. We thank you for listening to us today. As always, if you have any questions, you're about to hear an email where you can, get on there and send us a message, send us a question that you may have. Share this with somebody that you think may need to hear it today. And as always, we appreciate you tuning in and listening to Seymour from the Front Pew. And I guess this is where we sign off. Say bye, fellas.
See ya.
Bye, fellas.
Bye, fellas.
See you.
Thank you for listening to Seymour from the Front Pew. Our sole desire for this podcast is to glorify God by educating and encouraging his body. If you would like to learn more about anything you've heard today, feel free to reach out by email at staff@seymourfbc.org or by visiting our website at seymourfbc.org. If you're located near our community and do not have a church home, come worship with us at 10:15 a.m. on Sunday morning. Until then, we pray God's richest blessings on you and yours as you love God, love others, make disciples, and live the life.